Hey woodcutters, TopSaw here. Today I'm going to go over two of the most essential knots for tree work. The first one's a fisherman's knot, a single fisherman's knot, a double fisherman's knot, where you can use it, and then also a bowline. And then also a running bowline with this bowline. So I'm going to show these two knots. These are the two essential knots of tree work. And I'm going to go over a few different varieties of tying the knots and how you could use them. If you're new to this channel, think about subscribing, and then right at the end of the channel, I'm going to go over how to cut climbing rope and finishing it so that it's really easy to go through a Petzl Zigzag or a mechanical ascender of some sort. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. All right, the first knot I'm going to go over is the bowline. A couple of things about these knots. More important than actually tying a knot is being able to inspect the knot to make sure it's right. If your life depends on it, you should work and tie it like your life depends on it. So the way I tie a bowline is I take a bite, which is a loop over the rope. Then I take this end of it right here. I go up through the loop, around, and back through. And that's a bowline. It's really the most common knot for just about anything. The reason why it's so common and useful is that when you're done with it, no matter how tightly it got pulled, you could break it open this way and always untie it. This piece right here is called the tail. The length of the tail is at a minimum 5 times the diameter of the rope. This is not a safe knot to climb on. If you were to put yourself in a life situation, you would tie your bowline, same as last time, and then you would put a stopper knot at the end of the bowline on your tail. So if that's your bowline there, if you're going to climb on it, you would have to put a stopper knot on there to prevent it from coming undone. Let me do that bowline one more time. So I do it with a loop up over like that. I take the tail, it comes up through the loop, around the rope, and back down through the loop. And then dressing it is making sure everything lays flat, there are no crossovers in it anywhere, and inspecting it is making sure you tied it correctly. A very common knot in tree work is to go around something like a limb and tie what's called a running bowline, which is really the same thing. I'll go around the limb here. Here's my tail end. Here's the end coming out. I go up over that, and then I tie my bowline here, up around and out. And then this is called a running bowline because I could cinch it up. I pull this up, and it'll cinch up right there on my table saw. The best way to really get these knots down is cut yourself a piece of climbing rope, 6 feet long, leave it in your chair next to the TV, and whenever you're watching TV, tie that knot 5 or 10 times. Not just one day, but do it a bunch of times. Okay, our next knot is a fisherman's knot. There's a single fisherman's knot where you go up over the rope, around, and back through, just like that. Pretty simple little overhand knot. You could use this in a lot of applications. If you're tying 2 ropes together, I take my other end and tie a single fisherman's knot like this. And then those two slide together. I want to make sure I dress it. They're all laying flat, and inspect it. So there's a single fisherman's knot back onto itself. I actually do not use that knot very often. I actually use a double fisherman's knot instead. So a double fisherman's knot is the exact same thing. I go over a second time, and then back through this way. So that's a double fisherman's knot. I could do that again with this tail on the other side. So I'm going to go over, and back through. So there it is there. So with those two double fisherman's knot, I could slide them together, make sure they're well dressed, and then pull them tight and inspect them. So there's a single fisherman's knot, a double fisherman's knot. What I'm really using here is kind of a cinching knot. I could use this for joining two ropes together, for tying slings, a lot of applications for the fisherman's knot, one of which is also tying off to a carabiner. So let's see here. So rather than tying ropes together, I could just take the end through a carabiner. I want a long enough tail. I'm going to come up. I'll tie a single fisherman's knot first. So I go around, back through. My tail's long enough. And then it'll cinch down onto that carabiner like that. It's hard to untie. However, you could just unclip the carabiner from it and then pop the loop out. Again, if I'm going to tie a fisherman's knot, I almost always use a double fisherman's knot. So I'd come through the carabiner. I go around not once and through, but a second time around. Second time around and through. Make sure I dress it, inspect it. It's a cinching knot, so it'll cinch down right on that carabiner. So there's a double fisherman's knot there. The advantage of that over like a bowline is it won't slide around because it cinches down. Put a ton of weight on there, it'll seal up really tight on the carabiner and hard to untie, but you could always take the carabiner off and then just pop it through. So we have our bowline. One more time, make sure you're practicing this with the loop up over, up through the hole, back around and through. A single fisherman's, a double fisherman's, a running bowline off of this bowline. Then let me show you how I cut rope so it works well. So the way I do this is I take the electrical tape and I pull it super tight all the way around, as tight as I could get it, to really kind of compress that rope. And I do it for quite a distance so both ends end up getting wrapped. Then once I have it wrapped pretty tight, I cut it right in the center of that. On a wood tabletop. And then there's my nylon core, and then the green is the sheath. And then I use a lighter, really careful not to burn myself, stuff like napalm when it becomes molten. And I also make sure I got good fresh air when I'm doing this. I'm not trying to burn it as much as melt it. Alright, well, if you're new to this channel, think about subscribing. This channel is all things wood, from tree work to woodwork. I teach high school wood shop, and do trees on the weekend, bring those logs in, and we mill them up. Alright, well, if you have any more important knots than these two, or if you want me to go over any other knots, put them in the comments below. I love rope work and knots. I'd love to be a sailor, except for I get seasick, so maybe that's why I do tree work. I love everything to do about ropes and knots, so if you want to see any other knots, I'd love to do a video on them. And in my experience in tree work, if you know a bowline and a fisherman's knot, you're on a good road to looking like you know what you're doing.